Welcome back to the BookCast. Today we are unpacking every layer of the incredible novel Don Quixote. Get ready for a deep dive into its characters, themes, and the hidden meanings behind the story. For the dedicated learner, this is your shortcut to mastering one of the most important and, frankly, funniest books in literary history. We're not just covering the guy who fought windmills. We are exploring the foundational text of the modern novel, the incredible characters who populate it, and the deep, often tragic meaning behind the madness. Our mission is to extract the essential knowledge quickly but thoroughly for you.
And, to really get Don Quixote, we kind of have to start with the man behind it all. We can't just jump into the character without first understanding Miguel Saavedra de Cervantes. His life experiences really made the satire possible.
Yeah, Cervantes is, well, he's so much more than just the writer. He was a soldier, a veteran, someone who, as one biographer put it, achieved great actions long before he became illustrious as a writer. His own life was just packed with drama, military action, huge setbacks. Honestly, his biography reads a bit like those adventure stories he ended up making fun of.
It really does sound like it. We're talking about someone known first as a soldier.
Yeah.
So what were some of those real-life struggles? They must have shaped how he saw things like honor and, reality.
Well, his time in the military led to probably the most defining part of his early life, his capture. He had already been wounded, actually lost the use of his left hand at the Battle of Lepanto, a huge naval battle.
Yeah. Then, later, he was captured by Barbary pirates. His master, a guy named Dalimami, figured out Cervantes was, somewhat important, had connections. So he set this absolutely massive ransom. Cervantes basically had to give up hope of buying his own freedom because it was just too expensive.
That must have been crushing. But it's during this time in captivity that we see this incredible sense of loyalty. His ethics really come through, even dealing with, well, pirates.
Totally. Think about this sacrifice.
Yeah.
Cervantes somehow got hold of some money, probably meant for his own ransom, right?
Right.
But he generously used his share, the money that was his ticket out, to ransom his brother instead. His brother at a slightly lower price. He was finally freed in August 1577. It's just such a selfless act. It tells you a lot about him.
And he kept trying to escape, didn't he? These attempts sound almost unbelievable, like something out of a book itself.
Oh, they were legendary. He masterminded several escape plots while he was imprisoned in Algiers. One really tense one involved trying to coordinate with some ships, escaping his master's house. He ended up hiding in this underground cave in someone's garden, Hassan's garden, relying on others sneaking him food at night.
That sounds incredibly risky.
Hugely risky. When that plot failed and the rescue ships were spotted, he was arrested. Imagine the scene, angry crowds hooting, he gets loaded with chains, dragged off to Hassan's palace. And the risks were real. Hassan, the Dey, had actually beaten other Spanish captives to death right in front of Cervantes for similar escape attempts, but Cervantes just kept plotting for himself and the others. That determination is amazing.
And then even after surviving all that, getting back to Spain wasn't smooth sailing either, was it? He wasn't exactly greeted like a returning hero.
No, the troubles just kept coming. Later on, he got a job in the Royal Dockyard Victualling Department, basically getting supplies for the Spanish Armada. But then he got accused of malversation of office, basically, mishandling funds. Now, most scholars think he was probably just caught up in some complicated financial mess, not actually corrupt himself.
Right.
But he still got arrested and thrown into prison in Madrid. Another period of serious trouble and stress.
And isn't that where people think he might have started writing Don Quixote? Or at least got the idea. So this really hard life, this constant battle between his high ideals, you see it in his military service, his loyalty, and then the grubby, frustrating reality of Spanish bureaucracy and the legal system. That's what fueled the book.
Exactly. We know his straitened circumstances. He was always pretty broke. Eventually pushed him to publish the first part quickly. He really had to rely on his writing to make a living. It's quite an irony, isn't it? The author's real-life money problems gave us this masterpiece about, well, romantic desperation, hashtag tag 1.2, the novel's revolutionary purpose.
That really sets the stage for the novel itself. When Don Quixote came out, it wasn't just entertainment. It was revolutionary for literature. We all know that famous line from Montesquieu about what the book was trying to do.
Right. Montesquieu said, pretty bluntly, that it was written to prove all other Spanish prose fictions were worthless. Now, that sounds a bit harsh.
Yeah, a little bit.
But you have to understand the context. He meant those specific kinds of stories about knight-errantry, like the super popular Amadis de Gaul, or even those big patriotic epics like the Poema del Cid.
Okay, so what was wrong with these chivalry romances? Why did Cervantes feel the need to write this massive satire to take them down?
Well, they'd completely flooded the market. And in Cervantes' view, they were filling people's heads with impossible, ridiculous ideas about heroism, magic, plots that had zero connection to real life. They often lacked real literary quality, just repeating the same old formulas. The unbeatable hero, the magical helper, the damsel in distress, needing some kind of supernatural rescue.
So the main point of Don Quixote wasn't just to be funny, although it is incredibly funny, but to be a huge literary critique. Using satire to tear down those crazy, unrealistic romance novels, it was a deliberate act to shake things up.
It absolutely was. Cervantes basically used hyperrealism and um, a kind of dark comedy to say, look, this is what actually happens when you try to live out those absurd magical ideals in real 17th century Spain. The magic just vanishes, and what you're left with is a madman attacking ordinary people and getting beaten up for his trouble. Hashtag tag 1.3, the night in his launch.
And the person who brings those ideals to life, the agent of the satire, is introduced right away. Alonso Quijano, who later gets the surname The Good. He's a gentleman not rolling in it, but not poor either, and he's read so many of these chivalry books that he's completely lost his mind.
And that madness is the engine for the whole story. It's not just, a simple mental illness. It's this creative delusion where his imagination literally reshapes reality based on what he's read. He decides he has to become a knight errant to bring glory back to the world.
His first trip out, his first sally, is so important because it immediately establishes the pattern for the whole novel, this huge fantasy world crashing into grubby reality. He needs a castle, right? And where does he find one? An inn.
And through his eyes, we see the transformation. That ordinary, probably pretty basic inn becomes this amazing castle with its 4 turrets and pinnacles of shining silver, plus a drawbridge, a deep moat, all the stuff you read about in the books. The difficulty he has getting off his horse is real, the pain is real, but the place he thinks he's in, pure fantasy.
The humor and the sadness, too, starts right there. All this grand, epic language applied to a worn-out horse, a barber's basin he thinks is a helmet, and this shabby little inn.
And then the knighting ceremony. It's the first big moment of mockery. Don Quixote gets down on his knees and begs the innkeeper, who he sees as this magnificent castle commander, for the sacred honor of knighthood.
But the innkeeper, described as a shrewd fellow, immediately figures out DQ is nuts and decides just to play along to avoid any real trouble.
Exactly. This ordinary, probably slightly grubby innkeeper performs the luckless order of chivalry, pretending to follow all the ancient rituals. The fact that this sacred ceremony of knighthood is performed by a common innkeeper is Cervantes' first big punch against the whole genre. It just deflates the whole ideal immediately.
And what's the first thing our brand new knight does, feeling all official with his luckless order? He's supposed to be watching his armor, sees a threat, and attacks.
Right. He finds a couple of carriers trying to water their mules near the trough where his armor is resting. When the first one tries to move the armor, Don Quixote attacks him, hitting him so hard on the head that the book notes there would have been no need of a surgeon if he'd hit him again.
Ouch.
Yeah. Then when a second carrier tries the same thing, DQ gets attacked by a bunch of them. The landlord steps in eventually, but DQ remains completely calm, totally convinced he's in the right, despite the beating. The physical reality, the pain, it just doesn't break through his delusion.
That calmness, that ability he has to immediately reinterpret every failure as, like, the work of evil magicians, that's what keeps the story moving. But as soon as he leaves the inn and heads out into the world properly, we see the immediate and kind of tragic results of his ideals meeting reality head on.
Yeah, the initial failures are quite devastating because they're often moral failures, not just him getting knocked down. He tries to copy the books by freeing a young boy, Andres, who's being whipped by his master.
Right, and this scene just perfectly shows the gap between the romantic idea of justice in books and the messy reality of life for poor people. DQ demands the farmer untie Andres and pay him the back wages he's owed 63 reals. The master, naturally, promises he will, just to get this armed madman off his back.
But the second DQ rides away, feeling all heroic and successful. The master ties the boy up again and whips him even harder than before. Why? Because the master had to prove that the crazy knight didn't actually hold the real power there. DQ's impulsive heroism isn't just useless, it actually makes things worse for Andres. It's Cervantes saying, look, your beautiful ideals just don't function in the real world, especially with money and power involved.
And the humiliation just keeps coming. Next, he runs into some merchants from Toledo, and he sees them as a chance to immediately glorify his lady love.
Exactly. He demands they admit that his mistress, Dulcinea del Toboso, is the most beautiful woman in the world. When they, quite reasonably hesitate and maybe poke a little fun at him, DQ attacks. But again, it's not some noble duel. It's a rough fight with a muleteer who breaks DQ's lance and then uses the broken piece to just thresh him like wheat. Poor DQ is left groaning on the ground, cursing everything. The fantasy of chivalry keeps getting beaten down by muleteers and innkeepers.
Okay, so while DQ is laid up recovering from that beating back at his house, we get one of the most famous scenes in all of literature, the purging of his library. The priest and the barber burning his books.
This is pure Cervantes, the literary critic, speaking right through his characters. It's not just a random bonfire. I mean, the housekeeper definitely is eager for the death of those innocents, as she calls the books. But the priest and the barber, they're actually performing a very careful, very nuanced piece of literary criticism as they go through the books.
Okay, let's break that down. Which books do they save? And what does that tell us about what Cervantes thought made a book good?
Well, Amadis de Gaul, which kind of started the whole genre, gets spared. The priest calls it the best of the kind, because even though it's fantastical, it has a certain style, some literary skill. They condemn the books that are badly written or just too crazy or too focused on silly magic tricks. Things like The Mirror of Chivalry or The 12 Peers are sentenced to perpetual banishment, often because they're just too convoluted or the characters are weak. Cervantes is showing us here that he values good writing, decent structure, maybe a bit of moral purpose, even in fantasy. What he rejects is just repetitive, sensationalist junk. They even chuck translations of French stories into a dry well, although they do pause over things like Ariosto, deciding to maybe reconsider that one later. It's actually a really sophisticated critique hidden inside this, almost slapstick scene.
That's fascinating. Okay, so DQ needs someone to help him out, someone to bridge the gap between his crazy imagination and, well, needing to eat. He needs a squire. And in walks the great Sancho Panza.
Ugh, Sancho. He's absolutely essential. He's the physical reality to DQ's mental fantasy. He's the ultimate ordinary guy, promised rewards if he follows DQ. But Sancho is practical from the get-go. He tells DQ he thinks he'd be better suited for an earldom, not just governing an island, because he'll know how to give DQ whatever is most fitting, meaning food and supplies. He's focused on real, tangible rewards, the total opposite of DQ's abstract ideas about honor.
And their partnership gets cemented almost immediately in the most famous incident of all, the attack on the windmills.
This is the iconic clash, isn't it? DQ spots 30 or 40 windmills on the plain, but in his mind, they instantly become giants. He just charges straight at them, commending himself devoutly to his lady Dulcinea. Then the wind picks up, the sails start turning, the physical reality of the machine doing its job, and DQ, his horse, everything just goes crashing down.
It's pure physical humiliation, total failure. But he immediately twists it into proof of the fantasy, right?
Instantly. He blames a wicked enchanter for changing the giants into windmills right at the last second, just to steal the glory of victory from him. This whole mechanism, blaming enchanters for every single time reality intrudes, that's how DQ stays sane inside his madness. If he admitted they were just windmills, the adventure's over. But if they're enchanted giants, game on.
Even though he keeps failing, DQ has this really strict, although kind of nuts, code of honor, which he tries to impose on Sancho right away.
Yeah, he warns Sancho very clearly. Don't ever jump in if he's fighting another knight. He says it's in no wise agreeable to the laws of chivalry that thou shouldst interfere. Sancho is only allowed to help if the attackers are vulgar and low people. It's a very class-based code, totally designed to protect the idea of knights fighting knights, even though DQ hardly ever fights anyone remotely knightly until the very end.
Okay, next up we have the fight with the Biscayan. This starts because DQ mistakes some Benedictine monks for kidnappers.
Right again. Sancho, ever the realist, correctly points out they're just monks traveling, maybe with some luggage. But DQ refuses to see it. He's convinced they're evil enchanters carrying off a princess in that coach, so he attacks. This leads to this really brutal fight with the Biscayan squire who's accompanying the travelers. DQ yells out to Dulcinea for help, his usual move before landing this terrible blow.
And the Biscayan fights back hard.
He does. He gives DQ a huge whack, but DQ's makeshift helmet saves him, mostly. DQ's return blow, though, hits the Biscayan on his unprotected head and ear. It leaves him in a piteous plight, cutting off part of his ear. It's actually quite a graphic, bloody scene. It reminds you that DQ, even though he's mad, is genuinely dangerous with a weapon.
But the condition he demands for showing mercy, it's completely focused on his fantasy, isn't it? It reveals the real goal of all his adventures, making his imaginary lady famous.
Exactly. He makes the terrified lady in the coach promise that the defeated Biscayan will go all the way to the town of Toboso and present himself formally before the peerless Donna Dulcinea. The poor woman promises immediately, just to get him to stop. It doesn't matter who Dulcinea actually is, we find out later from Sancho. She's just a local peasant girl named Aldonza Lorenzo. What matters to DQ is the grand gesture, the public act of submission in her name.
All right, let's switch gears to one of the absolute weirdest and funniest moments. The attempt to make and use the balsam of Fierabras, this magical healing potion.
Ah, yes, the miracle cure. DQ claims he knows the secret recipe, which involves saying a whole bunch of prayers over 80 paternosters, aves, credos, the whole 9 yards, making the sign of the cross with every word. He brews it up and drinks about a pint and a half himself to test it out.
And the result is immediate and violent rejection, which, naturally, he finds a way to explain away.
Oh, totally. He barely swallows it before he starts vomiting violently. Then he breaks into this massive sweat. But does he think, maybe this stuff is poison? Nope. He concludes it can do good only to those who are of that order, meaning knights. His noble system can handle it. Commoners like Sancho, maybe not.
Which is terrible news for Sancho because he decides he needs to try it too for his bruises.
Poor Sancho. He drinks the balsam, hoping it'll fix him up, and the stuff starts working immediately. He is relieved so many ways and with so much precipitation that the rush mat upon which he laid was never after fit for use. It's just brilliant physical comedy. It completely grounds the magic potion. It doesn't heal anything. It just makes you incredibly violently sick, whether you're a knight or a squire.
Okay, the story takes a bit of a turn when they get to the Sierra Morena Mountains. Cervantes starts weaving in these other stories, much deeper, more complex tales of love and betrayal. These aren't really satirical. They feel like genuine romantic tragedies. It's like the novel stops making fun of romance for a bit and actually engages with it seriously.
That's part of the genius of Don Quixote, isn't it? Cervantes threads these fully formed tragic stories through the main plot. It almost feels like he's showing off, see, I can write a great conventional romance if I want to, I just choose not to focus on it. We see this first at the funeral for Chrysostom.
Right, Chrysostom died of unrequited love, basically despair, because of the shepherdess Marcella. She was beautiful, wealthy, chose to live this pastoral life, but just refused to love any of the guys who fell for her.
And Marcella is such a fascinating character, especially for the time. She shows up at the funeral, completely owning her wealth and her free condition, and she defends her choice. She basically asks, why are you calling me cruel? I never led anyone on, never deceived anyone. She says point blank, I neither love nor hate anybody. It's this incredibly powerful statement about female autonomy in a world where women didn't have much.
And Don Quixote, surprisingly, really respects her argument. He defends her, threatens anyone who tries to follow her. He seems to value that chivalric ideal of freedom, even when her freedom goes against the usual romance tropes.
Then we meet Cardenio, the wild man living rough in the mountains. He tells this heartbreaking story of being betrayed by his best friend, Don Fernando, who stole and married Cardenio's fiancée, Lucinda.
That wedding scene sounds like pure melodrama, straight out of a conventional romance novel.
It really is. Lucinda is forced into the wedding, but right after saying yes, she faints. They find a note she'd hidden saying she was already secretly married to Cardenio. This double betrayal just shatters Cardenio, drives him literally mad with grief, tearing his clothes, howling in the wilderness. Cervantes presents Cardenio's madness as stemming from real, intense romantic pain, which makes a really interesting contrast with DQ's madness, which is entirely self-inflicted, born from books.
Okay, so amidst all these complex love stories, DQ performs one of his most notorious acts of, let's call it chaotic good, freeing the galley slaves. This scene really throws the conflict between abstract ideals about freedom and the ugly reality of crime and human nature into sharp relief.
It's a classic DQ moment. He sees this chain gang of criminals being marched off to the galleys, and he decides they shouldn't be forced, that their public shaming is penance enough and they should be set free. Among them is this really interesting character, Gines de Pasamonte, a total rogue who claims he's writing his own autobiography. He says it's not finished yet because, well, his life isn't finished yet.
DQ's intentions seem noble in a warped sort of way, but the outcome is a total disaster, right? It kind of proves that some people are just criminals no matter what a crazy knight thinks about freedom.
He frees them, insists on it, and their response, immediate, brutal ingratitude. Gilles de Passamonte gives the signal, and they attack their guards, strip them, and then turn on Don Quixote himself. They start throwing rocks. A big one hits DQ right in the side, breaking a couple of ribs. Another smashes the pot holding his precious balsam of Fierabras. His idealism gets literally stoned and beaten down by the very people he tried to liberate.
So after that beating and needing to hide out from the authorities who'd be after them for freeing prisoners, Sancho grabs some food from the monk's meal they encountered earlier, and they escape into the Sierra Morena. And DQ decides this is the perfect time to do penance, to prove his love for Dulcinea.
Exactly. He decides he needs to imitate the great knights from his books, especially the ones who did crazy penances in the wilderness out of love. He plans to live on wild herbs and fruits, doing all sorts of austerities. He writes this flowery letter to Dulcinea, who Sancho finally identifies by her real name, Aldonza Lorenzo, daughter of Lorenzo Corchuelo, a local farm girl.
Huh, perfect. And he sends Sancho off to deliver this letter.
Right. And while Sancho is on his way back, who does he bump into but the priest and the barber from DQ's village? This encounter is crucial. They hear Sancho's story about the penance in the letter, realize just how deep DQ's madness goes, and they come up with the plan that basically structures the rest of the first book.
Oh.
They're going to lure DQ home by playing into his fantasy.
They need someone to help with the charade, right?
Yes, they enlist Dorothea, this beautiful, distressed maiden they'd found wandering in disguise earlier. It turns out her story connects with Cardenio's. She's a woman of humble birth, but with considerable wealth. And she, too, was betrayed by the same Don Fernando who betrayed Cardenio and Lucinda.
Small world, even in 17th century Spain.
Isn't it? So Dorothy agrees to play the part of Princess Micomicona, this fictional princess from a faraway kingdom who needs the great Don Quixote's help. This plan is clever because it allows the priest and barber to sort of manage DQ's delusion, gently guiding him back towards home without just shattering his whole world outright.
It's a shift, isn't it, from just observing the madness or being accidentally caught up in it to actively manipulating it.
Exactly. It's organized intervention now. Dorothea puts on this rich outfit they find, a petticoat, a green silk mantle, tells her fake story, and successfully hooks DQ. He has a quest, a noble reason to leave the mountains and conveniently head back towards his village.
Okay, so the novel moves into its second part, which Cervantes published later. And here, the satire gets, well, a lot darker, maybe even crueler. Don Quixote and Sancho run into this wealthy Duke and Duchess who have actually read the first part of the novel.
That's such a brilliant meta touch, isn't it? The characters in Part 2 know about the book detailing their own world. And this Duke and Duchess, they're bored aristocrats.
Yeah.
They decide, purely for their own amusement, to treat DQ exactly like the knight-errant he claims to be. They're going to give his madness the biggest, most elaborate stage imaginable.
Their arrival at the castle immediately sets that tone, right? It's all surface politeness, but underneath it's just cynical amusement and endless resources for pranks. DQ tries to act the part immediately.
Oh, absolutely. He tries to take the head of the table, fully believing his status as a knight-errant demands it. The Duke just finds his absurd formality hilarious, and the Duchess is apparently delighted by Sancho's earthy, common-sense remarks. They realize they've got the perfect live entertainment for their court.
And the biggest prank, the one designed to really test Sancho's famous simplicity and common sense, is making him governor. The Duke sends Sancho off to rule the imaginary island of Barataria.
And this whole section is fascinating because it really reveals Sancho's depth. Yeah, he's greedy, he's simple in some ways, but when you give him actual power, he shows this incredible natural wisdom. He's the complete opposite of the pompous, educated, but often foolish figures of authority.
That famous case with the staff really shows it, doesn't it? His intuitive justice winning out over legal tricks.
It's perfect. This creditor demands money back. The debtor swears he already repaid it, swearing on the hollow staff he's leaning on. Anyone else might just accept the oath. But Sancho, he gets suspicious. He asks him to look at the staff, breaks it open, and finds the money hidden inside. The debtor had repaid the money by putting it in the staff he gave the creditor to hold while swearing. Sancho's cleverness wins him genuine respect, a stark contrast to DQ relying on outdated book knowledge. Cervantes is definitely showing that wisdom isn't only found in books or high society.
But being governor is also a form of torture for poor Sancho, especially when it comes to food. This introduces another satirical target, the ridiculousness of some academic or medical experts.
Oh, yes. Enter Dr. Pedro Recio, the court physician. He's this magnificent caricature of pompous pseudoscience. He stands by Sancho's dinner table and forbids him from eating practically everything. No fruit because it's too watery, no spicy food because it's too hot, no partridges because, well, just because. Sancho is constantly having food whisked away from him, starving while surrounded by feasts. It's a great jab at how learned authorities can sometimes just inflict misery on ordinary people.
And the pressures of the job eventually just break him.
Between the starvation diet and then being put through this terrifying, completely fake battle, a siege orchestrated by the Duke's servants, just for laughs. Sancho gets trampled and has enough. He resigns. He says he'd rather have bread and onions back home in freedom than deal with the complicated torture of being governor. He was only there for about 8 or 10 days, never really got a decent meal, and left with no money. It's a powerful statement for simple liberty over the burdens of power. Hashtag 4.2, the cruel enchantments.
The Duke and Duchess aren't done with their fun yet, though. They escalate the mockery beyond just practical jokes into something more like psychological cruelty, using these fake enchantments to deliberately play on DQ's delusions.
The pranks become just relentless and, frankly, quite mean-spirited. One night, DQ is attacked in his bed by these supposedly invisible silent phantoms, actually just the Duke's servants in disguise who pinch and tweak him mercilessly. He wakes up with his face all scratched. The narrator makes a point of saying the scratches were not by God's hand but a cat's claws, constantly reminding us, the readers, that all this magic is just human cruelty and deception.
But the cruelest prank, the one with real consequences, revolves around supposedly disenchanting Dulcinea, and it puts Sancho in a really painful position.
Yeah, this one's rough. Merlin appears again, just a servant dressed up, and declares the only way to break the spell on Dulcinea is for Sancho to give himself 3,300 lashes, -5, on his bare buttocks. This is clearly designed to exploit the tension between DQ's idealistic quest and Sancho's very real, physical aversion to pain. Sancho is terrified.
They even stage this elaborate mock purgatory scene where DQ gets pushed around and pinched, and this young woman, Altisidora, who's been pretending to be desperately in love with DQ, comes back to life. And then Sancho gets tweaked and pinched again by the duennas as part of the penance.
The aristocracy's need for entertainment seems endless and involves zero empathy. When it actually comes time for Sancho to deliver the lashes himself, he tries to cheat, whipping trees instead, or just runs away, torch in hand, refusing to go through with the full count. He's finally pushed to choose his own comfort, his own backside, over his duty to his master's quest. It's the ultimate test of their relationship, really. Sancho's pain becomes the literal price for DQ's fantasy world to continue. Cervantes is really showing how, for these nobles, the suffering of ordinary people is just a show.
Okay, so this cycle of grand illusion, aristocratic cruelty, and painful reality has to lead somewhere. We're heading towards the climax, where reality finally, definitively breaks through DQ's fantasy. But before that final defeat, DQ gives one of the most thoughtful speeches in the whole book, this long argument about whether arms or letters is the superior path in life.
Yes, this is Cervantes tapping into a major philosophical debate of the Renaissance. What leads to true honor? Is it the life of the scholar, the thinker letters, or the life of the soldier, the man of action arms? Don Quixote argues passionately for arms. He insists the soldier faces far greater dangers and hardships, more poverty than the scholar ever does.
He really lays out the soldier's suffering, doesn't he? Facing cannons, mines, constant hunger, uncertainty, while the scholar is safe at home with his books.
He argues that the soldier's path, while much harder, is superior because it demands total sacrifice, total commitment, whereas the scholar often relies on patrons or the safety of institutions. It's this really powerful, almost tragic defense of the very life he's tried to imitate. And it certainly reflects Cervantes' own experiences as a soldier. He even advises that if you want wealth, you should join the church or go into business or serve the king at court, implying that the military life is chosen purely for honor, not for money.
It's a noble argument, but that path of arms has to end for him. And it does in Barcelona with his final, crushing defeat.
This is the real showdown. Don Quixote is challenged to a duel on the beach by the Knight of the White Moon, and he loses. This knight turns out to be none other than the bachelor Samson Carrasco, the clever guy from his own village, who tried earlier, disguised as the Knight of the Mirrors, to beat DQ and force him home. Carrasco lost that time, so this is his revenge, but also his continued attempt to cure DQ, not just mock him like the Duke and Duchess.
And the condition to defeat this time is absolute. It's designed to completely end the knight-errantry.
Exactly. The condition is that the loser must return home and give up bearing arms for 1 whole year. Don Quixote, defeated, accepts his fate. It's heartbreaking. He resigns himself, but not without one last defense of his core belief. Dulcinea del Toboso is the most beautiful woman in the world, and I am the most unfortunate knight on earth, he declares. Nor is it just that my weakness should discredit this truth. He gives up his quest, his identity, but not his faith in her.
So, facing a year without adventures, DQ comes up with one last fantasy. He decides they'll become shepherds, live a peaceful pastoral life. But Cervantes doesn't even let him have that gentle delusion, does he?
No. Sancho's actually quite keen on the shepherd idea, but on the road home, DQ suffers one final, completely unchivalric, grounding humiliation. They get violently knocked down and trampled by a herd of pigs, just ordinary pigs. And this time, DQ accepts it. He calls it a just punishment for his guilty head, and says he deserved it from the unmannerly swine. It's not enchanters this time, it's just reality, in the form of pigs. The absurdity finally hits him without a filter.
And this leads to the final transformation, maybe the most profound moment in the book. The fantasy dies, and the man, Alonso Quijano, returns.
DQ falls ill when they get home, seriously ill. And on his deathbed, he makes his will, and miraculously his sanity returns. He is finally, clearly, no longer Don Quixote de la Mancha, but Alonso Quijano, the good, as his friends called him before the madness. He renounces his old life, calls himself an utter enemy to Amadis de Gaul and all his generation, admits his foolishness, and warns against those wicked books. The madness is gone. But the price seems to be his life.
And the novel ends with this extraordinary little detail from the notary, highlighting just how significant his final moments were.
It's incredible. The notary, who was there to witness the will and his death, actually puts it on record, protesting that he had never read in any chivalry book about a knight-errant dying in his bed, in so composed and Christian a manner as Don Quixote. The great knight-errant dies surrounded by the weeping of his friends, but the sane man, Alonso Quijano, finds a peaceful, rational, Christian end. Recovering reality costs him his life, but perhaps it grants him a different kind of grace.
What an absolutely incredible journey through a novel that manages to be, all at once, completely silly, deeply devastating, romantic, and incredibly philosophical. We've seen literary satire morph into this fundamental exploration of what it means to be human, all driven by these unforgettable characters and the evolving relationship between the mad idealist and his very pragmatic squire.
And the legacy really hinges on that core tension, doesn't it? Illusion versus reality. The second the madness is stripped away, the man finds peace, but the spectacular hero is gone. The big question Cervantes leaves us wrestling with is, which life ultimately had more value? The glorious, insane adventure of Don Quixote, or the quiet, sane death of Alonso Quijano?
Exactly. Alonso Quijano, the good, he found that true composure, that peaceful Christian end, only after he denounced the very thing, the path of Don Quixote, that made him famous across Spain and eventually, well, across the whole world. What does that tell us about the nature of virtue? Does greatness maybe require a certain kind of madness? Definitely something to think about long after you finish the book. And there you have it. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us and this story. If you enjoyed it, a simple like or subscribe helps the channel out more than you know. Be good and take care.